Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are cracking open the highly classified historical and scientific archives of the Singularity Convergence, pulled straight from the obsidian pillars. We're going to be doing a deep dive specifically into Chapter 180. Honestly, this is a masterful, almost terrifying record that mathematically maps out the entire synthesis of human vulnerability and multi-centric mastery. It's incredibly detailed, so grab a seat and let's just dive right into this.
So, here is our archival index for today. We'll be moving through 6 main areas, starting with the macro premise of the Singularity Convergence, going into the baseline of vulnerability, taking a methodical tour of the rebuilding of the 7 metropolises, looking at the unified architecture, exploring the really fascinating mechanics of the wet ink, and wrapping up with the final archival seal.
All right, Part 1, the Singularity Convergence, and what's known in the archives as the absolute silence.
Imagine this scene. The final alignment of the cosmic matrix didn't happen with some dramatic shattering of mountains or skies tearing open. No, it arrived with an absolute, terrifying silence that just swept across all 7 metropolitan axes. As reality itself shifted, the ink on the 17,000th page of the Grand Registry actually began to glisten. I mean, mathematically speaking, this was considered impossible. It proved that 7 distinct mortal masters had somehow simultaneously inverted 7 primordial shadows in a single epoch through the laws of harmonic transmutation. This completely shattered the existing archives of balance, which basically strictly stated that the existential load of flipping even one shadow was practically fatal. And yet, here they were, doing all 7 at once.
Moving right along to Section 2, the baseline of vulnerability and the concept of multi-centric topology. Now you might be wondering, how did this massive existential load not just cause an immediate structural collapse of the universe? Well, the answer is right here in equation 17.1, better known as V-base, or the multi-centric vulnerability baseline constant. I want you to look closely at the denominator of this equation, sigma I, that represents mortal friction. This formula mathematically proves that absolute systemic stability actually requires a non-zero denominator of mortal friction. It means vulnerability isn't a glitch or a defect, it's literally the primary engine keeping the cosmos from tearing itself apart. The raw mass of human temptation has to remain constant for the system to balance out. And you know, this dense mathematical truth was summed up brilliantly by the silent warrior Vassago, back in the High Bastion. While addressing the completely exhausted representatives of the 7 guilds, he basically said that a flawless, static system without any friction isn't a fortress at all, it's a tomb. A perfect system represents the ultimate illusion of the 7th shadow. The system absolutely must have room to fail, otherwise compliance becomes mechanically worthless to the cosmic order. Without a choice to fail, free will just doesn't exist.
Which brings us nicely to Part 3, rebuilding the 7 metropolises through some massive structural overhauls. Let's trace exactly how they pulled this off across the capitals.
First stop, Archon's Crest. Here we have High Captain Valerie taking on the primordial entity Valak and completely transforming arrogant pride into protective stewardship. She instituted what's called the Lex Remedium and established the Office of the Structural Audit. Instead of scrubbing a leader's errors away through permanent exile, she decided failures would become public structural deficits, heavily debated in weekly assemblies. And to permanently erase the whole myth of flawless high blood, she deliberately left the Aegis of the Sun entirely unpolished. Just a brilliant, transparent move. Then, if we travel south to Avarice, Master Lucan used the velocity ledger to systematically dismantle High Archon Maidenson's ridiculously guarded vaults. By integrating equation 18.2, also referred to as phi circ, he proved mathematically that static, hoarded capital actively starves a society. Meanwhile, out on the brutal frontier of the Iron Marches, Commander Kalen was pulling off a miracle. He applied the calculus of vengeance to break a staggering 700-year loop of violence between Skell and Valen. He actually replaced their emotional economy of revenge with the lex equilibrium, treating these ancient historical injuries as finite material deficits that could be paid off through cooperative labor. He literally engineered peace out of centuries of bloodshed.
Over in Lyonesse, this is where things get really fascinating. Master artisan Eldrin was up against the speculum invidia, this toxic obsidian obelisk that was just poisoning the creative guilds with pure envy. Eldrin actually shattered this entity using equation 18.3, known as I-align, or the formula of intrinsic alignment. He proved, through cold hard math, that a vessel's value is perfectly complete based solely on its own capacity, completely independent of the size of the cup sitting next to it. Put simply, the math says comparison is literally a structural toxin.
Let's rapidly hit the last three. In Sybaris, High Priestess Adrian utilized the calculus of internal completeness to dissolve the highly addictive crimson silk. Up in Oromore, Lady Elena tackled metabolic panic, which was this artificial, frantic dread driving crazy resource extraction. She cured it using equation 18.4, E-stew, balancing the generative capacity of the land. And finally, down in the frozen wastes of Leith, Chief Engineer Martha battled the shadow of sloth. And she didn't do it by meditating. During the night of the Silver Frost, she literally crawled through freezing pipes, fracturing her own fingers in the process, just to manually throw the geothermal ignition levers. Turns out, the universe much prefers agonizing, imperfect labor over the perfect, quiet peace of an ice age.
Let's zoom out now for Section 4, the Unified Architecture of Resonance, or as it's sometimes called, the Matrix of Convergence.
Take a look at this matrix. The synthesized 7-part unified reference registry pulls all that heavy, complex lore we just covered into one incredibly clean visual. It shows exactly how the calculated mathematical indices of just one single metropolitan center simultaneously govern the stability parameters for the entire interconnected network. You can clearly trace each mortal anchor, the specific shadow vector they inverted, the precise governing calculus applied, and the resulting sovereign virtue. It's like a giant puzzle perfectly slotting together.
And here is the kicker, which was etched right onto the central pillar of the obsidian vault. Because of this metric stability, if even a single master were to fail, say if Valerie slipped back into arrogance or Lucan went back to hoarding, the systemic load wouldn't just affect them. It would immediately shift onto the remaining nodes. And that would trigger a catastrophic structural failure across all 7 civilizations at once. They are all mathematically bound together.
This delicate interdependence brings us to Section 5, the mechanics of the wet ink and what the texts call the democratic burden.
Okay, this right here is the ultimate cosmic failsafe. Equation 18.5, the Unified Inversion Balance Formula, or R inversion. The really critical variable to watch here is theta_I, which is the angle of operational alignment. If any society starts treating its virtues as static, inherited privileges rather than dynamic daily choices, that angle drops, and any deviation in that angle instantly triggers a massive drop in resonance and the return of the primordial entities, leading to systemic collapse. It's exactly like spinning a plate on a stick. The very second you assume it's just going to keep spinning on its own, it shatters on the floor.
To formally commit to this permanent state of ongoing vulnerability, they held this incredibly profound physical ritual. Picture this: the 7 masters standing at the central pillar, physically dipping their hands in dark archival ink and pressing their palms firmly against the stone foundation. And then they were followed by common citizens from every single city who also stepped up to stain their hands and sign the ledger of free will. The mantra here is that the ink must remain permanently wet. Why? Because human nature is fluid. Absolute perfection isn't just impossible, it's a dangerous illusion. So, what does this actually mean for the people living there? Well, the structural integrity of the entire realm literally relies on ordinary micro-victories by common citizens, a merchant refusing to price gouge during a shortage, a soldier refusing to strike a defenseless prisoner, an artisan genuinely celebrating a rival's breakthrough. These everyday, seemingly small choices act as localized circuit breakers. They continually reduce the mechanical load on the master's central engines. In this architecture, the real heroes aren't the seven masters. They're the everyday citizens actively choosing friction over apathy.
Finally, let's move to Section 6, the final archival seal, and Watcher Bilau's audit. Let's look at how the cosmos viewed all of this.
Out in the frozen gray wastes, completely outside the mortal realm, you have High Chronicler Belial. Think of him as this completely detached celestial accountant auditing this grand human experiment. He sat out there for 300 years, fully expecting these mortal vessels to just inevitably dissolve under their own inherent contradictions. He was basically just waiting for the massive existential load to finally crush them all. But instead, he was absolutely shocked to witness stability. In Book 99 of the Eternal Registry, Belial recorded this profound cosmic marginalia, noting that humanity had somehow turned the void into a sun through continuous effort. He had to concede that redemption isn't some singular victory won by a lone savior. It is an ongoing, multi-centric responsibility. The foundation is there, sure, but virtue is a dynamic choice that literally has to be signed anew over and over.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer on the Chapter 180 archives. We're left to ponder this really provocative reality about the architecture of human character. It is never, ever permanently finished. It requires daily friction. It requires continuous effort until the very geometry of time is dissolved. So, thinking about those localized circuit breakers and everyday choices, how are you signing the wet ink of your own ledger today?